Hello, my name is Tony Chan. I'm reporting for TelecomTV. Today with me is Dr. Frank Rühl, who is the Managing Director for Blue Ocean Networks, telecommunications consultancy. Dr. Rühl, or Frank, is one of the actual founders of the NFV movement, or Network Functions Virtualization. Let's start by having you define what NFV actually means.
So network function virtualization is about moving network functions which are traditionally deployed as hardware boxes, specific boxes, well engineered in the network, and moving them into a more software environment, into a micro cloud-like environment right in the middle of a network, so on our core network sites. It basically enables a cloud-like kind of environment instead of having dedicated boxes. It also means in the dedicated box you typically only have a single network function. When you're moving this onto a standard kind of like cloud environment, and standard is important here, interoperable, same kind of management across all the functions because it's a common infrastructure, you get a lot of benefits. So you are able to burst the cloud resources for different network functions against each other. You're not limited to the capacity limitations of an individual box, and you can significantly reduce your operational costs because you can have a standardized kind of like environment rather than a particular kind of like way of treating each of those functions, for instance. It also means that you can act in a much more agile way. So now you can throw in or take out a function, relatively quickly.
Okay, so the NFV movement has actually moved quite quickly. I think over the last couple of years it has generated a lot of support from the industry, and we had just one global carrier just launch a global platform on NFV just this week, I believe. Where do you think the industry is at this point? Is it poised for rapid adoption, or is it still experimental?
It is still in the experimental stage, but as you have noticed, it is growing very rapidly, right? So when the NFV effort started, so when we launched it in October 2012, we were just 13 operators at that point, global Tier 1 operators, but now there's of the order of about 30 operators, and there's about 200 member companies in total. So there's a lot of effort around the NFV. And it is one of the biggest, if not the biggest effort within the ETSI organization at present. So there has been a lot of momentum in this. But the way it is working out is that currently the requirements are still being formulated how to make this whole thing carrier grade. And part of this as a kind of like as a proof of concept is to have 18 formally approved network function virtualization proof of concepts that ETSI has actually approved, the organization, right? And part of the requirement was interworking. So it needed to have at least one carrier supporting each of those proof of concepts, and at least two vendors or more vendors, because multi-vendor interworking, multi-function interworking is a key tenet of this.
So how do you think NFV combines with SDN? Do the two go together, or do they have to be linked?
They don't have to be linked. They could be deployed separately. Okay. On the other hand, they offer a perfect match. Right. I think ETSI NFV is also seeing that, and you can see part of this in the sense that one of the key use cases for SDN itself, I think, is service chaining. Okay, because you are able to steer by flows rather than by just IP destination addresses, and within the NFV ETSI movement, service chaining is a key function. Now it might not necessarily be sitting on a separate SDN platform. It might be sitting within the cloud itself, but service chaining, or the way ETSI defined it as a virtual network function forwarding graph, which is very similar, okay, apart from some technicality, it is a key enabler, because basically what it means is that the traffic flows, the traffic that's flowing in the network, can be segmented and steered into the different kind of like service functions very flexibly and in an agile way.
Okay, so obviously this brings a lot of innovation within the telecoms network, but having covered the telecoms industry for quite a while, innovation, they talk about it, but they don't really like it because it means big changes to the network, how they operate. As a consultancy, I mean, what would you tell telcos who are looking at these technologies and wanting to benefit, but perhaps don't know how?
I think it depends on each telco where the opportunities are, right? Because different telcos have different environments. They have different pressure points. They also have different groups of services, that they offer. But obviously the important thing is to evaluate where the biggest opportunities are, from either the cost reduction or the new service generation kind of like a point. But every new introduction of new technology is a painful process, right? But the point is that there is some fruit to be had at the other side of that task. And with SDN and NFV, it enables the telcos to actually transform their current operations, which are relatively static. Like they cannot typically quickly introduce new services currently, partly because of the network, partly because of the operational system supporting it. Whereas some of the competitors of the over-the-top provider don't have the same constraints. They don't have to roll out hardware. Right? And they can quickly, even on a trial and error kind of basis, roll out services, and if they are not successful, roll them back. So moving to this SDN NFV requirement requires some painful changes, like changes in the OSS to make it more real-time, more flexible. It requires the introduction of some capabilities in the network, but it then makes the telco a much more capable competitor.
Okay. Within the NFV and SDN environments, do you see there's a need for an ecosystem to develop some of these applications for the industry in general?
Obviously, there's a need for the ecosystem, and both the formation of the ORNF and the ETSI NFV was, with the intention to create that ecosystem, right? So the work by carriers on an NFV kind of concept had been going on prior to this, but when the ETSI NFV was formed, they're kind of linked up together, and trying to create that kind of ecosystem. And you can see the success, as you have mentioned. In just 1.5 years, it has grown in ETSI to over 200 companies. And in just around 3 years in ORNF, it has grown to more than 150 companies.
So how would you differentiate between ETSI and ONF? Because ONF seems to be an industry body, whereas ETSI has traditionally been a standardization organization that's backed by the government, right? Or maybe perhaps I'm misunderstanding there.
In both cases, the impetus came from a group of carriers, right? So with the ONF, the impetus came from some of the largest operators, including OTTs, actually 4 OTTs and 2 carriers, right, which formed the ONF to try and take what was previously an academic concept of OpenFlow and make it more carrier grade, so it can be deployed in a more robust way for actual services, either by OTTs or by telcos. So actually, the OTTs are very interested in that kind of concept as well, the SDN kind of concept, right? And the ONF is trying to move faster than this typical standards body, delivering, the OpenFlow kind of standard. But it's sort of taking a kind of like standard forming role, in that space of the SDN, the OpenFlow specifically, right? The NFV ISG is not actually part of the formal ETSI standardization process, right? It is not trying to write the standards itself. It is trying to collect the requirements to deliver a carrier-grade service, and then afterwards distribute those requirements to organizations like ETSI proper, or other standards organizations like IETF and so on, TMF that may want, to actually write the standards fully. In parallel to this, however, there will be, proofs of concept, which, in practical ways, take the technology forward.
Okay. The last question is for NFV. There has been programs launched by some carriers and vendors together, focusing specifically, actually, on the carrier-grade characteristics of the equipment behind NFV. Do you think this is an issue to be addressed?
Carrier grade is non-negotiable, right? So if you're an operator, you want to deploy any new technology, it needs to be carrier grade, right? So you need to make sure that the service that you're rolling out is reliable, because else how can you sell it? So, and that is a key objective both of the ETSI NFV and I think also the ONF.
But in terms of the actual development, it seems like no one has actually come up with a solution to say this is the platform that can be used to support the rollout of NFV applications? Right now, there's no standardized, commoditized server platform that is deemed carrier grade, right?
I think the role of the NFV ISG group is to specify what are the requirements, not to produce the product, right? And there have been a number of, papers released, specifying the architecture, the key components, and so on. Things that have to be implemented to implement our NFV in a carrier grade kind of way. More things are coming, like security and performance and so on, right? So there are going to be specifications, but not delivering the actual product. Obviously, vendors will provide the product, and there will be more than one vendor, I'm sure, coming up with platforms. Some vendors have already come up with, platforms, but in some sense pre-standard. Right?
Okay, so from Blue Ocean's perspective, what are you going to market with? What are you telling your customers?
So Blue Ocean is about delivering consultancy, so giving advice on how to implement our SDN and our NFV to deliver business benefits for carriers, right? And the other side that we are going to be concentrating on is training and education, because I think it is a big area, but there's a lot of misconception and still a need for further education. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you, Tony.